We're live.
Yep, and bright.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I am Brandon Tessers. I'm a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy. We have Cecil with us as usual on camera today, and Sarah with us as well, although she'll be a disembodied voice. And this is just... I guess technically we're all disembodied voices, but just we have the image of a body online. That is a weird thing to say.
Everything we say is a weird thing to say.
As always, this is just an opportunity for us to chat and answer questions and have a conversation. Those of you who are here in the chat, feel free to ask anything at any point, no matter what. We pick a topic. We always pick a topic just to make it easier to get things started and to solicit questions ahead of time. And this week, the topic is exercise routines. We're trying to shift into doing topics like this where we're talking about like a specific task or category of tasks as opposed to the different parts of the brain or whatever that we were doing more earlier. But just because that's the topic doesn't mean that every question or every comment has to be about that. If you're here, your questions, your comments, our conversation with and amongst each other supersedes the topic. That's just to get us going. And I'll say, because it looks like it might be relevant, I was having connection issues last week and I tried to do some things differently to see if it would be better, but it's looking like it might not be. Is that the case, Cecil? Am I going in and out?
You're not going in and out, but you're a little visually choppy, so you're a little pixelated. But that's not a big problem. I mean, unless everyone's here for your good looks. But boom, that's an old person joke, isn't it?
How dare you? I will keep trying to make it better for next week, and definitively by June 1st. The reason that I'm in these temporarily different spot is because we are very excited about that we will be in our new physical office location, Effective Artistry will, starting June 1st, and we will have hardwired, fiber optic internet, so that won't be an issue. I will try and do as best I can. Hopefully this works better than last week, and I'll do more to make it better even next week. Does that cover everything that needed to be covered, Cecil, while I take my customary sip of tea?
Yeah, it does. And notice how I was paying attention this time. But it would be really awesome if we did a whole pixelated, if we had like a way of doing little pixelated versions of ourselves, because that'd be awesome. Think about us and 8-bit, like.
I'm sure there's a way to do that. I'm sure there's some kind of filter or something. Yeah, remember we talked last week. I was like, if I keep asking, one of these weeks you'll be prepared and you'll listen. And this week, not only did that happen, but you even referenced last week. So just a nice example of how language can, affect what we notice, even well in the future. Anyway, let's talk about exercise routines. And so the only caveat thing I want to say off the top today is, as always, general answers, general questions, general answers, specific questions, specific answers, and general means it applies in more cases, but is less impactful in those cases in which it applies, and specific means it applies in fewer cases, but is more impactful in those cases. I want to stipulate that that can be good or bad impact, that specific things can have more impact regardless of the value or the quality of the impact. Just as we're going to be talking about exercise routines, that we're probably going to be discussing physicality and, body image and all that kind of stuff, health. And so I want to be very clear off the top that there is no universal rule about any of this stuff, that we have statistics, which are mathematical concepts of how to kind of find a simple way to discuss a complex thing. But there's no such thing as a healthy habit that is healthy for everyone in all cases. So we'll try and keep note of that and keep referencing back to that as we talk. But I want to make clear that if we ever don't, that's because we're putting it all here at the front so that we can talk more quickly and efficiently as we move forward, instead of stopping every time to say this will not apply to everybody, that everybody has to know themselves, their body, their environment, their circumstances, their goals, right? That it's not for us or for anybody else to impose ideas about what is good or better or right or correct when it comes to well, anything, but specifically today to your body, to your exercise, physical activity, whatever. That's the only thing I wanted to say off the top. We can get into questions right away on this one.
Okay. So,
Cecil.
So with exercise, people, everyone says like exercise is good for everybody. So if you look up like anything that you are like, if you look up, is exercise good for people who sit? It's like, oh, there's like 1,000 websites and suggestions like, oh, if you sit, you should be exercising. If, is exercise good for people who are neurodivergent or who are neurotypical or people who blink, like everyone, so it's like the general catch-all is exercise is good for us. So we get that. But also, why is it the worst? Like, why is it the worst thing? And how do we how do we approach it in a way that's like tolerable or bearable? Or like, I know we talk about motivation and like lowering cost and increasing value and stuff like that, but like, why do we have to do it? And why does it have to be so terrible?
So you think you're asking a question that's too generic, but I'm good at generic answers. So, no. So first of all, I'll say that exercise is not necessarily good for everyone because exercise, it depends on what you mean by that term. Usually when I'm talking about this with clients or just generally, I like to talk in terms of physical activity as opposed to exercise, because I find that most people, when they say exercise, mean working the body for no other reason than to work the body effectively. Meaning like most people, when they say exercise, mean something like going for a jog or, lifting weights, or even if they are talking about something like playing tennis, they're talking about playing tennis for the express purpose of getting your body to change, in whatever way that you think is better. Physical activity, I think, is a better way to look at it, because part of the reason that exercise is the worst is because if we conceptualize it that way, then yeah, it is the worst. It is an immediate cost, a real cost, a thing that takes energy that is not in and of itself enjoyable. And again, exceptions to everything. Some people find different forms of exercise enjoyable, but generally speaking, most people when they're lifting weights are not like, yeah, this is the best, right? With the belief that it will pay off later. And it's very hard when you distance the cost and the value like that. The further distance it gets, the harder it is to hold those two things in mind to compare against each other. So in other words, if I do something now that sucks because I think it'll pay off in 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks from now it does pay off, well, right now when I do it and it sucks, it's going to be hard for me to be like, oh, it's for this purpose 2 weeks from now. Even if I intellectually understand it, it's hard to hold that. And 2 weeks from now, if and when it does pay off, I'm going to have a harder time remembering, oh, this is because of that thing I did 2 weeks ago. So the further we distance that, the harder it gets. I think if we look at it in terms of physical activity, first of all, that you said, how do we make it easier? That's one way to make it easier, that we're looking at just using our bodies. That's it. And for some people, that's, sitting in a chair all day, for some people that, like there's no preconceived notion of what might be best for an individual. Obviously, there's research and statistical analyses where we can make broad sweeping statements about things like, what are the recommendations? 3 aerobic exercise for 30 minutes, 3 times a week, something like that is like the generic CDC or, American Heart Association guidelines or whatever. And whenever that happens, as well as if you Google, is exercise good for people like me, you're always going to get a yes, because the guess is founded in observation. The guess is that in more cases, it's going to be yes than no. So if we can only give one simple answer and not get into the nuance and not know who you are specifically, then as a generic piece of advice, we'll say yes, But same with any specific recommendations of the type of exercise to do are based on what does the person giving the advice believe will be useful for most people most of the time in that case. So if you are worried about, your lower back is hurting and you work at a job where you sit in a chair for 8 hours a day, you're going to get, you should work out, and you're going to get advice on specific routines if you search it that way that are going to target the lower back or other, core muscles or things that help with your posture. Is that going to work for you if your back is injured in a certain way? Maybe not, or even probably not, or definitely not, depending on what the injury is. But it's generic. So to make it easier, talk about physical activity, not exercise, and specify who you are and what you're trying to do, as opposed to looking for generic advice. Does that make sense?
And also on that same note is, not that this is accessible to everybody, but if you were able to, especially if you have major issues or anything like that, seek the advice of a medical professional for it, because there are things like that are bigger issues than just like, oh, I need to get up and walk on the block for 30, 40 minutes, or whatever that is. I don't know.
Yeah, and
putting that out there too, because I bike a lot and I have knee injuries I go to physical therapy for, so like more exercise was detrimental. So just throw those out there for everybody. Obviously, it's probably already
just kind of like a reminder of what we always say in terms of cost and value, is that if you're not exercising, it's because the cost is greater than the value. And can you get the value up by motivating yourself, or by, arranging with a buddy to meet up to work out together, or for whatever reasons, circling parts of your body that you hate or things like that, they'll probably get the value up. But we want to look at bringing the cost down, not just putting value up, because sometimes putting the value up, in this case, very literally, leads to physical injury. Even when we're not talking about physical injury, though, like a lot of the problem with getting the value up in order to make yourself do something is you can hurt yourself. You can spend too many resources, pay too high a cost that your body cannot sustain, your brain, your mind cannot sustain. And yes, getting the help and advice of an expert is always great, although I will always say that no expert is infallible or knows everything about everybody. So getting expert advice is a good idea. Doesn't mean listen to an expert over what you know to be true about yourself. Which is probably a bad thing to say for liability purposes, but but it's true.
Like you would tell people to sleep.
Brandon said to ignore experts.
So you talked about exercise like not being the worst by this kind of goes into like everything we talked about is it's kind of like breaking down and figure out what you want.
Yeah, individualize.
So like how do you start that? So like say someone wants to like get up and start increasing their physical activity for whatever reason, because they sit down all day, or they just want to enjoy this changing weather and enjoy spring. Like what's the best way to start that? To
start what, getting out more? That's what this person wants to do.
Yeah, like just start
get outside
exercise.
more?
If I want to like just like exercise for whatever reason, what's my first step?
Some of you who come here frequently are going to notice a pattern here. First step, observe. Look at what's already happening and see if you can just lean into that in order to accomplish your goal. Second, set your goal. Determine what it is that you're trying to get, because there's a difference between my back is killing me and I need to strengthen some muscles so that stops hurting, or at least that's my guess of how it would stop hurting, or I want to lose some weight because I think I will look more attractive to people and therefore feel better about myself, or my cholesterol is high and I want to do some things to make it less likely that I have a heart attack in the future, or whatever, right? So you got to look at what is your reason behind doing it. Remember, we talked about goals and markers at one point. Remember that weight particularly is a marker, not a goal. Nobody cares about the number on the scale. We're using it as a marker because it's helpful. And then we'll get to that in a second, why and how that's helpful. If that's what you're using, not everybody is going to or should use that as a marker. But observe what you're already doing, make a clear determination about what you're trying to go for, and then try to lean into what's already happening, build on what's already happening in order to get to your goal. Only if you experiment with that and find that that's not possible is it time to start looking into like adding on new things, taking on new things. So in other words, what's this person's theoretical goal, Cecil? Just
let's
get
talk
outside
about
for 20 to 30 minutes a day? Okay.
So I like a lot into that. So, but like I would like to do other exercises because I'm scrawny. I know it looks like I'm big and bulky from here, but I'm scrawny and I like to do upper body workouts because I never do that. And we have like a gym downstairs in the building. That's so like how do I get myself started there? Because so far what I observed is
good.
I was like, all I do is like go, oh, I should do that. And like, oh, I'm a terrible human being for not doing that because I'm just lazy and stuff. And then I go eat like, shove my face full of food. So,
Well, regular viewers might have already picked up on this, but so far in describing to me what it is that you're wanting to accomplish, you have said what's currently existing that you don't like. I'm scrawny. And you've listed the things that theoretically should make it easy for you to do what you are saying you should do. I have a gym in the basement. It should be easy for me. Then you're saying what your plan is to accomplish a goal that you still have not named. Doesn't mean you don't have it in your head, but it shows us the prioritization that your brain has in terms of when you're talking about this thing, what are you focused on? You're focused on your current shortcomings and the fact that it's easier for you than it should be for other people, or might be for other people, or than it has been for you in the past, and you're still not doing it because your goal right now is the exercise in and of itself. It just in the language that you've used, right, is I should start lifting. But why? What is it that you believe that if you lift will change?
I will change the world. No, just to like get that regiment in because I'm not always able to bike because I've had injuries and everything else. So and like bad weather and everything else. So I need some kind of physical activity in order to like for my mental health.
Okay, so if that's your goal, is great. If that's a much clearer thing. What you're saying is, when I don't have physical activity, I have noticed a correlation. I've observed that when I have physical activity, I feel better. When I don't have physical activity, I feel worse, mentally, emotionally, whatever it is that you mean, right? So now you've identified, well, my favorite thing to do, the thing that I love and enjoy, is biking. So I'm going to do that. But when I can't do that, I want to be able to do some other physical activity. But you're jumping straight from there. Now, what you've been doing is jumping from that. I need some other physical activity I can do when I'm not biking, presumably because of rain and or knee injury, or weather or knee injury are the two big reasons. Are there other reasons that you might not be able to bike?
Well, like rain doesn't really stop me on that one. It's like severe weather. But the amount of people outside,
okay.
So on a really nice day,
or,
or people.
Okay. Okay. Too many people outside. Anything else? Not projecting into the future or imagining what might stop you, but what things have you noticed that have stopped you from biking when you otherwise would have wanted to?
I mean, like just daily responsibilities, like either like work or like obligations like that.
Okay. So default is going to be bike because you like it, and we don't need to break it down more than that. You may have, and we might be able to, but we don't need to. You like it, and you've noticed that it makes you feel better. Your theory is that you feel better when you get physical activity, whether it's the biking or something else, that you'll feel better either way. That's the physical activity that matters. And you've identified 4 cases now in which you might not be able to bike: when there's severe weather, when you have an injury or some other physical reason that you're not able to do that specific activity, when there are too many people outside, or when you don't have enough time. So what we're looking for right now is not how do you get better at lifting, it's what physical activity, because that's what you've established as the goal, right? Physical activity, so I feel better. What physical activity can you do in as many cases as possible, as many of these cases as possible, when you're not able to bike, that will accomplish what you're looking for, and that is the easiest / most enjoyable? Because I bet that with lifting weights is not going to be that. So first of all, I would say in case number 4, which is I don't have the time to go for a bike, that's going to be hard to find something else to fit there, because if you don't have time to bike, you're not going to have time for whatever other thing, unless what you're talking about is I refuse to go for a bike that's less than 20 minutes. So I need something that takes less than 20 minutes. Is that what you mean? Or is it really more just like I don't have time for anything in that moment?
Yeah, I think a combination of both, but really like a 20-minute bike ride is, I would go for it, but like that's like, it's like turning on the TV and stopping for the commercials and,
Okay, so we're looking for, and the best and simplest would be one thing that covers all cases, but that might not be possible. But we're going to start by looking for that. We're looking for something that can be done in 20 minutes or less. I mean, I picked that number arbitrarily, but something where you feel like if you only have a handful of minutes, it's still worthwhile to do. something that you can do when there are a lot of people outside that doesn't involve you being around all those people. Something that you can do when there's a knee injury in particular that prevents you from being able to bike, but really any physical condition that prevents you from being able to, or when there's severe weather. So me just listing out those cases, what comes up for you? Because you know your situation better than I do and what things are available or interesting to you.
I don't know. Like, it's just like, cause, I mean, I bike because I love it, not just because the exercise, not because the exercise. Like, it's just like happens to be something I love, and that happens to do this. But like, you know, like in college, like, you know, I did rock climbing and stuff, which was a great bit of exercise. But now it's like doing exercise for exercise's sake. Even if it makes me feel better, it's like I sleep better, I'm less restless. Like, I don't get so antsy physically.
Do you enjoy rock climbing?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have access to rock climbing? The ability to do rock climbing?
No.
Is there a rock climbing gym somewhere near you?
No. There's like momentum and stuff, but like it's not accessible.
Okay, well, whatever, I'm going to assume that you've done the research. Now, if this was like in coaching, I might ask more specific questions, you know, instead of saying near you or accessible, we might get into what is the barrier that's making it inaccessible and can we address that? But we're going to move on, you know, not get into all those details on stream right now. So rock climbing, you're telling me you don't have access to, so that would have been great, but it doesn't work. Is anything else coming up?
No, not like, no.
Okay, that's okay. That's where we start because, again, observation. If you've already observed something that does these four things, and I'm holding my fingers up and I have touched each one for the same thing each time, you know, I can say that this one was the time issue, this one is people outside, this one is injury, and this one is severe weather. Same one each time. This doesn't necessarily matter for you guys to do for yourselves per se, but what I'm trying to do is make it easier for you to observe these four reasons. I've physicalized them and I touch the same one each time that I mention them. So if you've observed something that addresses this, that's the easiest. If not, we go the other way. And this is going to be more complicated, but we start trying to design something that you have not already observed and are not already aware of. And yes, by the way, just in case anybody's wondering, we may end up coming back to, no, actually lifting weights was the best option. But before we get into the work of doing whatever we need to do to make it less costly and or more valuable for you to lift the weights, we want to make sure, remember, figure out what you want, then make a plan, then execute. We want to make sure that there's not something better. So restrictions wise, this would be something that has to be unaffected by severe weather. So presumably something that you can do indoor, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So an indoor activity, anything we come up with that's an indoor activity will address the inclement weather one. That will also theoretically address too many people outside on a nice day that's too nice and too many people are outside, unless the indoor activity we're talking about is in another public location that might also be crowded on a day where a lot of people are outside. Although that's not super likely, because if everyone's outside because it's so nice, then indoor spaces theoretically would be less crowded, but we'll just be aware of that. It needs to be an activity that does not involve your knee. So an indoor activity that does not involve your knee. If it's in your own home, like you said, you have a gym in the basement, that's best. But if not, an indoor activity in some indoor space where you can reliably predict there won't be a lot of people there if there are a lot of people outside. And then preferably something that can also be done very quickly. So yeah, again, if you do something in your house, that's going to resolve this one, and at least part of this one because there's no commute time.
Yeah.
But you also want it to be very little setup or breakdown time. You know, so lifting weights probably doesn't fit this one because getting set up to lift weights, going through the reps and the routines, you know, there's not as much value to that if you're going to only have 5 minutes to do a thing.
Yeah.
I'll also point out one thing that, again, we're not getting into today, but that we might theoretically if we were in coaching is I am just taking at face value what you're saying is that you've noticed that physical activity is what makes you feel better, sleep better, etc., and not biking specifically. If biking specifically is what is making you feel better, and you're just assuming that it's because it is physical activity, it's possible that it's actually for other reasons. Maybe the enjoyment of it, maybe the sunlight that you get, maybe whatever, right? But again, we're not getting into that today. I'm going to assume that you've done whatever observation and experiments you need to do to know that it's the physical activity piece. So indoor doesn't involve the knee, quick setup, quick takedown, easy to get in and out of, preferably at home or some other uncrowded space. Does that clarify anything that you like to do that you've already observed?
No.
Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to ask you to do is to say, start observing. Just like last week when I said, every time I ask this question, you'll start to notice more. Now I'm going to say, start observing when you're in your house, anything that you do that gets your heart rate up, or whatever marker it is that you're looking at that you qualify as physical activity. And yes, I know your mind went to a certain place. And that counts, by the way.
No, I was thinking like my heart rate whenever I think about like going to public places and stuff. I get anxious and my heart goes. So that's what I was thinking about. But
so it's not just about the heart rate. That was the other thing I was going to point out is whatever things that you've done that led you to the theory that it's physical activity, have they all been aerobic exercises like biking? Or do you know that it also works with anaerobic exercises like lifting weights? Maybe I should clarify those terms because not everybody knows. Aerobic meaning that it gets your heart rate and breathing speed up, but is sustainable for a long period of time. Anaerobic meaning it is very short bursts of very intense work. So lifting weights is anaerobic. You're pushing your muscles to their limit in short bursts. Aerobic, biking, running, jogging, whatever is aerobic.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just like after if I do something like last weekend I helped a friend like move trees in their garden from the rooftop, which was very exciting and fun, and like it's very strenuous and stuff, but I felt a lot like I was very exhausted afterwards, but I felt very good at the same time. And that was like very much just like that was like a lot of lifting and moving in short burst. So doing it, but afterwards I felt a lot better. So yeah.
So that is great. And going to point out the reason we go through this process instead of just jumping into lifting weights, it is entirely possible, especially given the answer that you just gave, that the lifting weights will not accomplish what you're thinking that it might accomplish. And that's part of the reason that you have been struggling to get yourself to do it. Because even in the times that you have done it or done things like it, it has not paid off in the way that you're hoping it would pay off now. Also shows the benefit of expanding from exercise to physical activity, because doing what you did made you feel great. I also happen to know that a couple of weeks ago, you spent part of your weekend, volunteering to repair bicycles for kids. And I'm going to guess, I would ask normally, but I'm going to guess that that is also a day where you felt the good kind of tired. You used your body for a purpose that felt good to you, and you got all those other benefits.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, of course, we could divert here and go into, sounds like maybe if you get into like some volunteer work, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't meet these 4 criteria. You already have biking. We're looking for something you can do in your home, right? You already observed what is. Cecil's already athletic and loves to bike. What if you have to start from scratch? So same thing. We're going to start by, the specifics are different. That's why we always talk about general questions and general answers, specific questions, specific answers. Some of these things are specific to Cecil, but the process is going to be the same in terms of we want to look at what things you already do, because everyone uses their body. So we start there, and the further back that we go or might need to go, typically we're going to find something of, I used to enjoy blank, right? So we can start with that. Now, if you really have not observed or remembered anything that fits these criteria, that's okay. We just would go to the next step. But Cecil has noticed some things, so we're starting with what he's got. Remember, that other part is the goal setting, which we've been talking about with Cecil here too. What is it that he's trying to get? So if you are trying to get yourself to exercise, why? Is it because if Cecil had at the very beginning of this said, my goal is that I want to have bigger muscles so that my shirt's draped differently or whatever, so that I feel bigger or that people perceive me as more muscular, then we wouldn't be doing all of this right now, because yeah, you need something, some anaerobic exercise that's going to increase those muscles. But that's not his goal. So be clear on what yours is. And if there's nothing to observe to align with that, then you can get into the guesswork. And that's what we're about to do with Cecil right here. So now I am going to step in as the coach, right? But it doesn't have to be a coach. It can be just any other person, because I can offer you options of which you may not be aware, Cecil. Now you may already. So I might put things out and you might say, no, that doesn't work because X, Y, and Z. In my role, you don't need to tell me why it doesn't work. If you're already aware of it and have already considered it and decided that it's not a good solution for you, we don't need to go further into it than that. The exception being, if you have considered it and would like to do it, if only ... Then it might be worth saying, because maybe I can help you come up with something to remove or accommodate for that if only ... part.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
for example, yoga is something that you can do in your home. There are YouTube channels that you can follow that make it easy for you to do. There are other benefits, because what you're talking about is your emotion, not to mention that you have a knee injury, so increasing core strength and flexibility. And I'm not an expert in all this, but as a human being, I'm aware that yoga exists. I don't do it myself, so there might be problems there. But I can say, is that something that you've considered?
Yes.
And if you have considered it and rejected it, great. Unless, like I said, you've rejected it because you would like it, except. Is that the case? Or no, it's just not a good fit for you?
I mean, I'm always going to say, except for everything. So it's like, that's hard for me to say.
Well, that's fair.
So like I do
how many things you can accept? Go ahead.
Like I do physical therapy, these exercises almost every morning. So like I kind of like want to do something different, and like yoga kind of like works into that same thing, and it like, yeah. And I feel like, yeah, so I'm saying pass on that one. Not that yoga's bad, it's just like not something that has fit well. That's what I wanted. So
now, one thing that might address 3 of these, but definitely not one of them, is a stationary bike or a bike trainer in your house. Bike trainer is a, like, I don't know how to explain it, a treadmill for bikes, basically, that you could take your, I know you know, but just for people watching, you can hook your existing bike up to it and ride your bike in place. Is that something that you've considered?
Yeah, but I want to make sure, I want to try to do something that doesn't involve my knees. So like we have a rowing machine that I like, but I can't, but the repetition on my knee is the problem.
Okay, well, so what's good there is we just addressed 3 of the things and it still didn't work. So what we're actually now down to is the one. That really what's preventing you from doing physical activity is the knee, because you have solutions that you're saying work for you in all of these cases, when it's severe weather, when there's too many people, or when you just don't have time. So now we're down to, we just need something that you can do that's physical activity, preferably aerobic, because we're not sure that anaerobic will do what you want it to do, that doesn't involve your knee. Do you know of anything like that already, either that you've done or just that you're aware of as a possibility that could be done?
I mean, like, no, I don't know of anything. I feel like I'm like, maybe I should. I can't think of anything that like does arm things or exercises, something that doesn't involve my legs.
So this is where, I am at the limit of my knowledge of physical activity. And one option is always to go hire or look for somebody who's more of an expert, either by Googling, like you said at the beginning, good aerobic exercises for people with bad knees, right? Mm-hmm. Or by hiring a specific trainer or talking to a friend who has, do you have access to a pool?
No, I mean, like COVID's like created complications for that. So like I used to go.
But other than COVID, is that something that might be a solution?
Yes.
Okay. So now we have eliminated it down to the case that we're discussing is it needs to not involve my knee, at least that I can do through the end of, whenever it becomes safe or comfortable for me to go back to the swimming pool that I used. Mm-hmm. Now we could ask more questions about swimming, would you be, obviously you're uncomfortable with swimming in a pool, which I personally agree with, but you know, whatever people's thoughts are, it's not that all of them are good. It's that this process has to respect a person's agency. There's no point in trying to convince somebody to do something other than what they already want to do. But is there any other way of swimming, like swimming in Lake Michigan, that you might be comfortable with and that you might have access to? And I really don't know. I'm just asking.
No, I mean, like there are people who would go like swimming in
I don't care
the
about
lake
you.
is.
I'm asking you.
No, I'm not going to. It's cold, and I'm a baby, so
Okay.
I'm like, oh, it's
All
20
right.
degrees outside. I'll still go biking, but I'm like, oh, the water's like 60 degrees. Like, oh, that's too much for me. So,
But this also tells us other things, like theoretically, even if we do exhaust whatever we can come up with and get back to, nope, the lifting is the only thing we can come up with, then we also know whatever things that we're going to put in place to bring the cost down or the value up, you know, shouldn't be something that takes too many of your resources, because this is a temporary solution that when it's safe to be out, when COVID is not as much of a consideration as it currently is, then you will either bike or you'll swim. Yeah, cold water is a hard stop. I'm with you on that too. And by the way, my dad, who's here, hello, Dad, thanks for coming again, mentioned an interactive bike like Peloton makes it easier.
yeah.
And that is a very common, by the way, solution here. Get other people involved. That drives the value up, both because other people are expecting you, you know, whether it's a friend that you're working out with, whether it's an interactive like class like that, or class at the gym, or paying somebody, a trainer, or, you know, something like that. But it also brings the cost down if that other person has the knowledge of what you could or should theoretically be doing. Because part of working out, part of exercising especially, is knowing what things you're supposed to do. Lifting is one idea. Going there and knowing what lifts to do in what way and what weights and what amounts is all stuff you have to figure out. If you have somebody else figuring that out, it brings the cost down. Accountability groups, yep. Atrox's accountability groups have helped them, even on Facebook. And yeah, accountability, remember we've talked in the past, just means there's a person that I have some amount of care for, not because necessarily I think they're great, but just because their opinion of me impacts me. And they're aware of a thing that I have said that I want to do.
Yeah.
That's all. There's ways to increase the accountability from there, but that in and of itself, if Cecil, just this like example, you telling me that you want to lift weights because you and I have a relationship and my view of you impacts you, makes it more likely, more valuable that you'll lift weights now.
No, because like when you ask me about it, you're not going to make me feel bad about it. That's the problem with everyone around me. Is like I'm like, oh, I want to do this. And people are like, oh, that's so cool. And then like if someone follows up with me, they go, oh, that's fine. Can I support you anyway? And I'm like, no, you could tell me that I'm a terrible person and beat me down to like motivate me. But everyone around me is like so nice and supportive. It's like, ugh, the worst.
Just to clarify for people watching that some amount of what you're saying is serious and some amount of what you're saying is a joke. That
yeah.
Well, that's why I called out accountability, because that is specifically one of those things where a lot of times people think accountability means, oh no, people will hate me if I do badly or if I fail. And the more obvious that hate is, that disappointment is, or that punishment, whatever is, then the more effective it is. And that's true. The worse the response to your failure, the more valuable it becomes to do the thing. Now, again, unless we're coupling that with a decrease in cost, it's probably unsustainable. My brother, I'm going to call him out here. I should have said someone I know, but it's too late. My brother, who is a very naturally athletic person, and also a very proud and stubborn person. Not that I believe in personality traits, but I'm trying to be quick here. Tried lifting weights after have taken a break from lifting weights for years and years. He was out of shape and was trying to get back in. Cecil knows this story, that's why he's laughing. And because he went with a friend who was someone who lifted weights and was in better shape, my brother just pushed himself. The value was so high to not fail, to not give up, to be able to do what this other person was doing and asking him to do, that I don't even know what it's called, but he got a condition where his body started eating his own muscles. And ended up, did I freeze? Or is that just you there? Hello, I'm back.
Hey, I went off as well, so I was.
That was weird. Maybe it wasn't my internet. Maybe it was. Well, anyway, we're back. Sorry about that. Just to finish the story about my brother, that the value of being able to do what this person asked him to do was so high that he pushed his body through it and ended up in the hospital for 3 days because I don't know what it's called, but he did some, when you lift weights, you break down the muscles a little bit and then they rebuild stronger. That's basic, like, amateur knowledge of it. And apparently he worked so hard and broke his muscles down so much that it started entering the bloodstream, that his own body was digesting his own muscles. So just to make the point that talking about getting value up to spend a high cost is not sustainable or can cause injury, sometimes that's very literal. Working on a task until you have a panic attack is a version of that too. Atrox suggests Beachbody, which I have heard other people recommend as well. I don't know it personally. It's accessible, choose from a variety of options, qualified trainers. Yeah, didn't like using YouTube videos because basically credibility. Atrox says because they had no idea if the YouTube video people knew what they were doing. And yeah, that's part of this is credibility. Who do you trust? Who do you believe when they make a suggestion? I have heard, in fact, my wife has even encouraged, me for us to look into Beachbody. She has a coworker who swears by it. Anyway, back to your example, Cecil. So we'll skip ahead a little bit. We would probably spend more time going through and seeing if we can come up with options. But let's assume that we've looked through everything and determined that, nope, really, this is the best. It's not a good option to lift weights, but it's the best option that we can have. Then we're going to get into what can we do to make it happen. So we have two options. We can bring the value up. We can bring the cost down. What are, again, the first things that come to you because you know your situation better? I will make suggestions if we can't come up with enough things that you think will work through your own observation. Well, always better to start with anything that you might be aware of that might make it more valuable to do or less costly to do, or both.
I don't know. So I tried putting like weights up here by my desk. So I was like, oh, cool. In the morning when I'm up here, I could just like start doing that. But all I ended up doing was stubbing my toe on them and getting angry at them. So
I'm sorry, you cut out, or maybe I cut out for a second. Why were you getting angry at them?
Because I moved them up here, but then all I would do is hit them. Like I just kick them all the time by accident. And so that just like did not result well. And I just didn't use them. And I was like, so,
okay. So that's the thing you tried and it didn't work. Now we can come back to maybe it might work on a different thing. But what other ideas are you already aware of or coming up with now in the moment?
Well, the whole idea is like doing it with someone like in the building, but like the problem is like, I don't know how reliable that be, but everyone's schedule being different. And a lot of the things I want to do is like, when I have the time, I want to be able to do it. So I don't want, seeing if someone else is available is not always an option.
So here, that's good to know. And here's an important piece that a lot of people can benefit from knowing. We don't need to spend our time discussing an option that's not going to work for you. I'm asking you, what things are you aware of that might? Now, part of the reason that you're saying these things is because you're anticipating that I might think they're possibilities and you just want to head them off at the pass and like tell me why that doesn't work for you. And that's fair. But if you wait and I do suggest them at some point, you can tell me, or I might not suggest it. So at worst, we spend the same amount of time discussing it. At best, we spend no amount of time discussing it. Also, what it shows is that you're in a place where you're putting more time and effort into thinking what I think might be a good idea than yourself.
Well, so by saying that you'd be like, so you tried this one. How about this? So you can give me some insight for other things to try.
Well, we can get there, but just like we did before, let's start with things that might work easily or that you've already noticed. And then later we can get into, okay, this was a problem. this would have worked except. And it may be that you don't have anything, and that's okay.
Was it's like if I do it, then like and get the like we talked about last week, like the habit. If I start that, then it's easy to keep going with it. But like if there's a pause and like restarting and reengaging is the difficult part, which I think is probably true for a lot of people.
And that's worth talking about. But you're right, we talked about it in the habits one, so we won't spend time on it right now. All right, so we'll skip ahead again. Normally, we might go longer on this. We would go until I felt like you had exhausted that, which I don't feel right now. You were getting ready to say something else, but we'll skip ahead a little bit. Yeah. So number one, this would be my first suggestion. That
you break it up a little bit there. Sorry.
Since that freeze, something happened. It was working better for a while, and then
it might be our hosting service too, but.
We're just going to deal with it for the 14 minutes. I don't want to take time to do something that might not work. So we've identified 4 cases in which you want something else to do. 3 of those are covered by the rowing machine. I know you only mentioned it very briefly. We were talking more about a stationary bike, but you mentioned that you have a rowing machine that you love. You just don't do it when your knee is hurting. So here's number 1. If we have now theoretically identified that the lifting is the best thing to do when your knee is hurting, here on forward in the morning, if you if it would be beneficial for you and not annoying for you, set a reminder on your phone in the morning to go beep, beep, and the alarm says something like, how's your knee? So that early in the day, you evaluate, how is my knee? If it's good, I'm going to either go for a bike or I'm going to row. If it's bad, I gotta lift. And so you know from the beginning and can start working your head around that. Now, I don't know the specifics of your knee. You may know more than the morning of. You may know, on Monday, like, oh man, my knee is going to be bad this week, and you can make plans that way. But having more time in advance enables you to get ready and get prepared for it, and also to slot it in where it works best for you. Instead of it being the end of the day and it's like, oh crap, I didn't do anything today, but my knee hurts, so I can't go for a bike. Ugh, I got no choice except to lift weights or do nothing, but it's 10 o'clock at night and I don't want to lift weights or whatever.
Yeah.
So we'll start with that. Then if you said you tried having the weights up near you, and the problem with that was that they were getting in your way and you were hitting them all the time and it made you angry.
Yeah, also because I wasn't using them, but yeah. So I tried putting them more and more in my way. So I'd be like, oh, I have to at least move these. And if I'm moving them, I might as well do this while I'm moving them. But then it's just no. And I'm like, oh, I spent my coffee moving these things. And then, that belligerent thing.
All right. So what if we flip away from this and say instead, yeah, you're the worst. That's exactly what this work is aimed to get at, is making people feel bad about how terrible they are. So what if, say I'm breaking my rule because I said let's pretend we evaluated that only lifting weights would work. But what you're telling me is that if it's in your physical space, that will be easier, but that having the weights in your physical space is not a good solution because then you just feel worse about not using them. Well, so in that case, we brought the cost down and still weren't using them. So to get this to work, we'd have to bring the cost even further down. And it's not that that's not possible. Oh, crap. Did I freeze again? No, I'm here. Okay.
Yep.
I almost swore, but I didn't. What about a pull-up bar? A chin-up bar. I don't know what you call them. Is there a space? Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, I could look at that. I don't know what would be entailed for that, but that's a good idea.
Okay. Well, and then again, we might, if we had more time, spend time researching what might be entailed. But at this point, we've come up with something that's worth trying. And that's when we say, let's go ahead and do that and have it tried and see what happens. If it works, great. If not, Kitchquatch said, you enjoyed moving the wooden logs outside so much. Why not repeat that? What made it fun? And that is a good question. The reason that we're not exploring that is because we identified already that if he is able to go outside and his knee is feeling okay, he always has the option to bike. Now, maybe Kitchquatch heard something that I missed picking up on. Was the wooden logs, was that more enjoyable to you than biking?
Well, I think it was referring to when I was moving all those trees and stuff.
Yeah, moving the trees.
No, it wasn't more enjoyable than that. It was just
So those are good and valid and valuable questions, but they're It worked so well for like 40 minutes. Now here we are again. Hello?
My server.
You smiled telling about it. Yeah. So those are all great observations and good questions, but they're aimed at solving a different problem than the one that we're trying to solve right now. Meaning if what he was saying coming into this is, I like biking, okay, but I want to have things to vary it up more, switch things up more, then we might go down. Made it fun part. What about the moving the logs made it fun? That's a great question. When you were talking about moving the logs in the beginning, you said things like being outside, doing something that felt like that it mattered. And maybe some of this I'm actually mixing up with conversations that you and I had previously about you moving the trees. So I made some assumptions about what it was that you found that made it fun. Because the important thing about that question is that it's analysis, which, just like we've been doing, we want people to do their own analysis first. What's already there? What are your theories? Let's test that first before we get into other things. So yes, and that might be more helpful for other people who are trying to do this thing, is talking about that observation earlier, right? If you don't have physical activity already, then yeah, look at, does going on a hike, is that fun for you? And what about that might be fun? And how can we replicate that or make it easier or more frequent that you do that? For example, I know that I really love playing with my children, and some of the ways that I play with them involve like a lot of physical activity, and I get sweaty and breathe hard, and we play for 30, 45 minutes. So it's not that I set in my calendar or my schedule, like I'll play, on the trampoline with the kids, or I'll, play the games that we play where I lift them up and stuff for 45 minutes. But if I structure my life around that, if I talk to the kids about playing those games or enjoying playing those games, then they're going to be more likely to ask me to play those games, and then we'll play them more frequently, etc. So yeah, that's why we're talking about physical activity versus exercise. But just talking about routines generally, yeah, analysis of what is it that I'm already doing and I already enjoy? What about that do I enjoy? So that I can apply it to a different thing. If I can't just do this whole cloth, let me find the parts of it that I like so that I can apply it to my new solution. And so, yeah, those are all great questions. In this case, though, we want to focus on things like we had identified at the beginning of being able to do inside and whatever. So we've arrived at the conclusion of it's worth looking into whether or not a chin-up bar might be a good thing for you to do. I have heard of people, and again, this is not my expertise, where you might want to talk to somebody else, but I have heard people say things like putting up a chin-up bar where you just do, every time you pass it, you do one, or you hop on and do 3 real quick and then walk away. So it fits that time thing too. It's real easy to get in and out of, especially if you have a spot that you can put it up and leave it up.
Yeah.
So now you try it. And if it works, awesome. And if it doesn't, awesome, because you'll observe having tried it and what parts of it you liked and what parts didn't work. And then we come back and we do more. So next week, Cecil will tell us all how it goes.
Work out, people.
So I actually liked this, even though I know we spent most of the time doing one specific thing, but usually we're answering more generic questions. And so it's kind of nice to show more of what the process of this looks like when you can ask questions and go back and forth, as opposed to just having, 1 sentence or 2 sentence question and try and pull out everything you can out of that. But as I always like to do, we have 7 minutes left. Let's get some specific questions.
Does anybody else have any other questions about anything?
Here, I'm here now, so I'll take some of the pressure off of Cecil. And if anybody else has questions, please feel free to jump in. I don't know what question to ask, but I know that I need help. I think I've been trying to exercise 5 times a week because I know it helps me, kind of like Cecil, like it I know I have observed that it is much more helpful, but I guess I'm having trouble finding when in the day to do it, because I know that I do it. I love having done it in the morning, because then the rest of the day I'm like, oh yeah, I accomplished something, and that's all great. But also because in the evenings I'm usually like, well, I'd rather watch TV. But for me, yeah, it's just finding the time in the day to schedule that, even if it's like 10 minutes.
So we are focusing in today on exercise routines, physical activity. This is why I didn't do what I'm about to say real quick, and we're not going to do it this time either with Cecil, which is to say, what other things do you do, have you done, might you be able to do that will get you the same benefit without the same disadvantages of needing as much time or whatever. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to assume that exercise is the only way to get to what you're going for, or physical activity. Yeah. This is actually pretty common, especially with neurodivergent people, especially with people whose sleep schedules are off, which is very common in people with ADHD, but really just kind of across the board. You know, I know there are diagnoses like delayed sleep phase disorder and things like that. But for people who, for whatever reason, like to be up later at night and sleep in later in the morning, it tends to be that morning time is not the easiest or most enjoyable time to work out. And most of everything is structured in our culture where, yeah, if you're not doing it in the morning, it's going to be harder to fit it in somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So you got to look at the specifics. And I'll say, and especially, you know, for anybody who takes medication, like I know for myself that my preferred time, brain and body wise, to work out is after work at like 5 p.m. I don't do that because I only get after work, you know, 2.5 hours with my kids. So I'm not going to take a half hour or an hour of that to go work out without them, unless I can find a way to do it with them, like playing those games and things like that. But that is common among neurodivergent people, especially ADHD, especially on medication, is that the afternoon, you know, at the end, a good time to do it. Now, I don't know, and we don't have time to get into the specifics about why different times of the day are not as beneficial for you. Mm-hmm. But you can also look at modifying what it is that you consider working out. So kind of just like we said with Cecil with the pull-up bar thing, if it's, you know, when you have 5 minutes or every time you walk past, you hop up and do 3, will that get you what you're looking for? And it may or it may not. But we can split up other things up into that as well. If for example, yoga is your thing, and again, don't know much about yoga, can you do 5 minutes of yoga at one point in the day and then 5 minutes again later? My father once made the suggestion to me, and I'm sure he got it somewhere, but I don't know where. Maybe not. Maybe he made it up. If he's still here, he can tell us in chat. That something like set yourself, you know how people do drinking games? Do the same thing with physical activity. So as you're watching TV at night, create a game for yourself that every time a character's name, you know, every time this character's name is said, I hop up and do 3 jumping jacks and sit back down.
Oh my God, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Love that.
Huh. Yeah, Fritz, that's a good idea.
Well, and also I had a friend recently tell me that he has used the Apple Watch for that, and you can like compete with people, and it just tells you randomly through the day, it'll be like, okay, do like 10 sit-ups, and you'll just do it, and it becomes a game, and like other people can see that you've done that. But this sounds like a similar kind of thing, like making a game.
Yeah, and that can be really great and helpful for some people. It could be really terrible for other people who will just feel worse and worse about falling behind or not doing what the Apple Watch tells you to do. So keep that in mind. But yes, prompts, external prompts of any kind are going to be easier than generating that internally, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. And same with, you know, every time a character's name is said, do a thing. You can also make an arrangement with the people that you live with where you play a game with each other where if I ever say or do this thing, you got to drop down and do 2 sit-ups. And if you ever say or do that thing, you know, and again, that could go very poorly or it could be fun.
I like that too, because it, because I think a lot of people, I've gotten better about this, but a lot of people think of working out as like either I do it or I don't. Either it's an hour or I don't do it at all.
That's a good point.
And what I like about this is that it kind of makes it throughout the day. And like if it works for you, you are more active throughout the day. And I know a lot of us are sitting at home all the time. We're not walking, you know, to the train like we used to, like with the pandemic. And so, yeah, I really like that.
I'm glad you said that, because that's literally what I was just about to say. Let go of the idea of exercise as something that takes a half hour or an hour all at once.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just the idea that some is better than none. It's also maybe I do want to do a half hour, but can I do that in 31-minute increments spread throughout the day? Another thing, and then I'll go and you guys can wrap up because I got to go to a client session, but is look at your to-do list at the beginning of the week, look around your house or whatever. Anything that you are aware of wanting to do or needing to do that involves that kind of physical activity, plan it out so that you're putting some of that on each day, as opposed to what I have a tendency to do is like Saturday, I'm doing all my like yard work and everything all at once. But if you're busy and you need these things done anyway, then maybe you can spread it out. Like, okay, I'll weed the garden on Monday and I'll move those boxes on Tuesday and whatever. That can make the tasks easier because you're spreading it out, but also give you physical activity every day. That's like intrinsically something that needs to be done.
Awesome.
The way like, cool. Awesome. Well,
thank you guys. I'll talk to you all next week.
Okay.
All right. Bye, Brandon.
Bye.
Brandon. Thank you guys for joining us again here at This Is Not Therapy Hour. We're here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you guys for engaging with us and everything. As always, feel free to check us out on effectiveartistry.com. If you have any questions, comments, anything, send us an email. You can also contact us at our Instagram or Twitter. That's at EF_artistry. Feel free to just drop us a line and questions, comments about anything. We're people and we'll like to talk and engage and talk about this stuff. We are doing our streaming tonight, hosted by Fusion Academy. That's at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can find that on our website. It's for a Zoom webinar, so you just go there and log in, or the little thingy, and then it lets you join. Yeah, so hope you guys have a great week, and we will see you guys next week.
Thanks, everyone.